Why isn't Matt Gaetz being prosecuted for a possible violation of federal gun laws based on the revelations in the House Ethics Committee report? That's one of our topics on Legal AF After Dark Edition. Take a listen.
This ethics committee report, I think people get it, that Matt Gaetz there was a finding that there was substantial evidence that Gaetz was involved in statutory rape of a junior in high school, that Matt Gaetz was involved in illicit drug use while all this while he was holding public office.
It was as bad as we thought it was going to be, except for they couldn't find substantial evidence of sex trafficking, but everything else is a tremendous stain on his, to the extent that his reputation could be stained, a tremendous stain on his reputation.
Exactly, Popok. And, you have the text messages and people are wondering, well, why didn't they find by substantial evidence that there was sex trafficking? Gaetz would use this website called Seeking Arrangements, which is now called Seeking, which is like a sugar daddy website that kind of masquerades as that. And Joel Greenberg, who did plead guilty to sex trafficking, he would find the girls and the women on this website. They would kind of meet up and have dates, that they would call them dates. And then there would be payment exchange for services. And then in one of the lawsuits that was brought by a Republican lobbyist arising out of this kind of whole thing, a number of the women were deposed. And if you look at the depositions, they were asked, do you think that you were trafficked? Do you think that this was trafficking? And the women would say things like, this was what was expected in this situation. No, I don't think I was trafficked. So if you're wondering why, why the prosecution did not go that extra step, I think they looked at the deposition testimony from some of the women. And I'm drawing a distinction here. That's not the 17-year-old girl is a girl. That's statutory rape. That should have been charged, in my opinion, in Florida. It wasn't because of the fact that Florida is controlled by Republicans and Gaetz a Republican in that state. But other people have been charged with that in Florida, which I'll get to in a moment. But that's why the feds thought that they would struggle to get that conviction, because I think that, some of that deposition testimony, which is not flattering at all for Matt Gaetz, even though Gaetz was like posting that as though like,
well, let me before you go on, because sometimes this gets lost. His wingman, Joel Greenberg, is in jail for 9 years in a federal penitentiary and willingly testified and would testify against Matt Gaetz. We'll talk about that when we get to the crimes part. He was a former tax assessor for Seminole County in Florida. About Matt Gaetz's age, they ran together. When I say wingman, I mean like they did things together. They had parties, according to the report, drug-fueled parties, underage girls, and the rest. Everything that Matt Gaetz did, Joel Greenberg went to jail for 9 years. I'll just leave it at that.
So here's some of the testimony. And the way it would work is Gaetz never had the Seeking account. It was Greenberg who had the account, and Greenberg was the one who would find them. And so here's like what Gaetz posted. He goes, this is what Gaetz was saying was like part of his defense. Another one of the ethics witnesses who was an alleged prostitute claims she was indeed not when actually pressed in a deposition. This won't be in the ethics report because, of course, were you escorting, working? What were you doing? I wouldn't consider any of those. The answer, I wouldn't consider it any of those. There was a lot of times where I did not get paid for being there. In that time, I thought a lot of these people were my friends. Question, okay, all right. So you wouldn't characterize anything you did in 2017 as sex work? Answer, no. And what she's saying is a lot of times I wasn't paid, but then there were times when she was paid. He goes, this is what Gaetz's other defense was. Giving funds to someone you are dating that they didn't ask for and that isn't charged for sex is now prostitution. There is a reason they did this to me in Christmas Eve report and not in a courtroom. So this is his defense. Giving funds to someone, he says because he's dating, he claims it's a date with the ladies that were found for him, and that they didn't technically charge him, but that it was a given what was going to take place as part of this relationship, payment for sex, that therefore there was nothing wrong with it. Because here is the deposition that he posted. So it wasn't the amounts charged did not depend on how attractive a guy was. Is that fair to say? Answer, I never charged anyone anything. Like I said, it was just given. And Gaetz is like, oh yeah, innocent. It's like, what are you talking about?
How is this I'm listening to
How
you.
is this
And
a defense?
I'm waiting for you to get to how this is a defense.
He cherry picked that as the
Right.
best piece of evidence for him in this. And by
Right.
the way, you're right, Popok. I want to be clear. I'm disappointed that the DOJ did not prosecute him for the same things as Greenberg. I wanted to tell you why their justification was. There's other depositions where the women said that they didn't think that they were trafficked. And I thought the DOJ looked at that. And again, we have a lot of complaints with what Merrick Garland did, but judge for yourself if you thought Garland should have brought those charges.
Look,
but clearly,
one thing before you move on. Mike Gaetz, the Republican chairperson of that bipartisan ethics committee, it's 5-5, except they give the chair position to whoever's in the control of the House, and that's the Republicans. And they fought long and hard to delay the publication of this report. And then another good reason Matt Gaetz shouldn't be the top lawyer in America and the attorney general. He files a lawsuit to try to stop the publication after it's published, and it's moot at that point. But just gains negative attention for himself. But in the opposition or the dissenting one page that was attached to the dissenting members of the committee, they went out of their way and actually spilled ink to say, we don't disagree with any substantive finding of the committee about the substantial evidence to support statutory rape, illicit drug use, bribery, improper use of office, and all that. We just don't think we have the jurisdiction to have released that report because he's no longer a member of the House. But the first line, the best that his supporters on his MAGA Republican supporters on that committee could come up with is we agree with the findings. We just don't think it should have ever come out. And then there's one little secret Easter egg here. Somebody flipped on Matt Gaetz, because in order for that report to be released, they had to get a vote from the Republican side. I don't know who it is. I'm not here to out them, but somebody grew a conscience and said, maybe the ethics committee is the one committee in the House that should be publishing their findings and not withholding it because of the nature of the name of our committee. And that got somebody, maybe not a MAGA, this reminds us all that there are moderate, what I call country club Republicans that aren't MAGA, that aren't automatically going to vote with the Speaker of the House and MAGA in the House. Donald Trump knows that. Donald Trump knows that it's going to be difficult for this Congress, this House, to get anything passed. He knows that. We watched what happened in the 118th first term and second term. It was a do-nothing Congress. If it wasn't for Hunter Biden, they would have done nothing at all. No bills got passed that helped the American voter at all. And every time they just careened from one crisis to another related to the debt ceiling or how to fund the government. That's all we ever, other than that, the American people could just ignore Congress because it did nothing. It'll do nothing again if the Democrats have their way, and they do. And they're disciplined. Hakeem Jeffries learned at the knee of Nancy Pelosi. He knows how to hold the Democrats together. And so Trump knows that. That's why executive orders are going to be the focus of Donald Trump's efforts to try to implement his policy in the shortest amount of time possible. And that's where this Legal AF comes in, our Legal AF channel comes in, because all roads lead to a court disposition. But you want to turn to crimes. Why don't you think, I have a question I wanted to ask you about Matt Gaetz. Now that the report is out, are we going to assume that Trump's going to give him a pardon on the federal side and it's now left to the state to do something about it? What's your handicap on whether he gets pardoned now because that report has been published?
0. I don't think he gets it. He's not going to be prosecuted by Florida prosecutors in DeSantis' state, and Trump's DOJ ain't prosecuting him. So does he get a pardon? Do you think Trump pardons him? No. Okay. I don't think it's needed because there's no. I think they'll just let the statute. They'll let the statute of limitations run, and maybe at the end of the Trump administration. But look, the link here is that Pam Bondi, Trump's head of DOJ, who will get confirmed because she was the Attorney General of Florida, and that gives you the experience whether you like it or not. Yeah, she'll get. She's not one of the people who I think won't get confirmed. But she was the attorney general in Florida when all of this stuff was going on with Gaetz, when Gaetz was not prosecuted for statutory rape. And then all of the pretty much local district attorneys that would have jurisdiction over Gaetz in Florida are DeSantis puppets or DeSantis picks in Florida. So that's why, you know, he doesn't really run the risk of being prosecuted, even though he should be. I mean, look at this though, Popok. Miramar. I looked at other people who did
I know
this.
Miramar. I used to represent Miramar back in the day.
So Miramar cop arrested accused of sex with 17-year-old girl. And this was June 23rd, 2023. This story was this cop met a girl on Tinder. She said that she was 23 years old. The cop was 28. They went out on a date. They had sex. She then said that she was 19. They had sex again. It turned out she was 17. Statutory rape. You don't get any. There's no issues of intent or anything. He was charged with that. Think about he was charged with that, but Matt Gaetz in Gaetz' situation where it was done in a kind of prostitution sense. And Gaetz was not charged with, and there are other examples.
I'm going to give you the insider Florida also reason for that, as you know, because we've got Dave Arenberg on the network. The local DAs in Florida, where I practice and I've lived for a number of years, are known as the state attorneys. They ultimately answer to the attorney general, but by each county has its own state attorney. And the reason that Miramar cop that Miramar is in Miami-Dade County is because Kathy Rundle, who's been the long time, over 30 years state attorney, I know her well, Kathy Fernandez Rundle is the state attorney, and she is law and order, not MAGA, Republican, but not MAGA. And she runs a very tight ship there with her prosecutors. Dave Arenberg in Palm Beach County, I guess he might be leaving soon, but he was for a long time the Palm Beach County state attorney. And so he runs his show there. Now, if the governor doesn't like the way that the show is being run, I think I said the attorney general they report to. Not really. They really report to the governor. And the governor, as you pointed out, is DeSantis. DeSantis has taken on what he's considered to be woke, liberal, or democratically appointed prosecutors, like the one in Hillsborough County and different places, and threatened to replace them or actually fire them. There's been lawsuits about him firing prosecutors who he didn't like. So any of them that are thinking, and Matt Gaetz, I believe, is from the West Coast of Florida. I forget exactly what where his district is, but wherever it is, it's MAGA/Republican country. One other thing, though, some of the things that are obvious crimes that are coming out of the report, some of them don't have a statute of limitations. And so if he doesn't get the pardon on the federal side and the Democrats take back the presidency in 4 years, he could be prosecuted for some of these things. There's a couple of those that don't have actual statute of limitations. So that's where we are on the Gaetz report.
That's where we are in the Gaetz report. But I want to just, pivot. One, I think the DOJ should have charged him, but they didn't. That's just my opinion. They thought that they weren't going to get the prosecution. Statutory rape should be prosecuted in the state of Florida. Republican leadership there at the highest levels did not prosecute Matt Gaetz. That was a decision that they made there. But you want to talk about real weaponization? Who did the DOJ under Biden prosecute with the Republican special counsel? Hunter Biden for what? Hunter Biden was not a member of Congress. He was not in a public position. He was a private citizen. Biden wasn't the president then. Biden wasn't the vice president then. It was in between Biden administration, being the VP and the president when Hunter engaged in the conduct. But what did they go after Hunter for? There was no allegations of statutory rape with Hunter. It was consensual sex with adults, consenting adults. What was the Hunter charge? Oh, wait, I know what it was. It was for, let's pull it up right here, filling out an ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearm form saying that he was not under the influence of drugs around that time period. Wait a minute, doesn't Matt Gaetz want to abolish the ATF? And wait a minute, one of the things in the report was that Matt Gaetz was under the influence of drugs and alcohol and hard drugs around this time. And he's a gun owner. So did he fill out that same form when he was buying guns? Because we know he was buying guns at that time. Should there be an entire special counsel investigation into Matt Gaetz instead of a private citizen like Hunter Biden? I mean, just look at what Hunter was charged with. I mean, this is wild. According to the indictment, Hunter purchased a Colt Cobra 38 SPL revolver from a federally licensed firearms dealer on October 12th, 2018. By the way, same time when Gaetz was doing all these drugs, according to the report. The congressional report. When purchasing a firearm, a prospective purchaser must fill out a firearm transaction record ATF form 4473 and certify that all of his or her answers on the form are true and correct. As alleged in count 1 of the indictment, Hunter Biden knowingly made a false written statement on form 4473 intended and likely to deceive the dealer he purchased the firearm from when he certified that he was not an unlawful user of or addicted to any stimulant, narcotic drug, or any other controlled substance. And by the way they got the evidence about Hunter was when Hunter took responsibility for his actions years later and talked about in his autobiography that he was addicted to drugs and how it took him so much to overcome it. And it was his message to other users and people who suffer from drug addiction about how you can overcome these dark days. And he mentioned it was a dark day. He purchased a gun while he was addicted to drugs and how it was the lowest point in his life, but he's taken accountability for his action. The Republicans go after that guy. Not the statutory rape guy, not the congressman who they want to make attorney general. So let's be very, very clear here what's going on. And frankly, I'm disappointed that Democrats didn't give a more robust defense of Hunter Biden and the public in general. They shied away from an issue that I think actually made President Biden so freaking relatable. We all have someone in our lives, and we may have a tragic story where someone passed in our lives. This may be something about ourselves. People who are addicted to drugs or alcohol or have alcohol abuse issues and who are struggling to get by, who need a helping hand, not a wag of the finger and not the ridicule and not the pushed aside that leads to even worse behavior or even kind of worse outcomes. You need to be helpful. So to me, one of the things I loved about President Biden was to see a father who was always with his son at the lowest moments, when Biden wasn't running, when the spotlights weren't on, just private assistance to help your kid get out of a difficult situation. And I know there's so many people out there who know that they wish they had that in their lives or that they want to be like that in their lives. So whether that's legal or not, that there's a moral component of this as well. And sometimes there's the intersection of morality and law. But we want to talk about real weaponization. It's Hunter Biden. Where we last left off, Popok, I was just talking about the disparate treatment of Hunter versus Gaetz. On the one hand, Gaetz, public person, Congress member, picked to become an attorney general. He did all of this while in public trust. Statutory rape. None of that's the case with Hunter. Hunter, private citizen, no statutory rape, was not picked to be in an administration in a top position. They went after Hunter for filling out an ATF form that said he's not addicted to drugs. And also, I mean, what a vague statute in and of itself do. Are you addicted in that moment? Are you addicted after? But anyway, ostensibly, Gaetz filled out that same form. There's no special counsel going after Gaetz. And there's none of that.
So a couple of things. One, I want to make one correction. I said that Kathy Fernandez-Rundle, the longtime 30-year prosecutor in state attorney's office in Miami, was Republican. I'd known Kathy for a long time. She's actually a Democrat, which also explains why there's prosecutions for things like that in Democratic Miami-Dade County and not in other places like where Matt Gaetz lives. Secondly, on the one of the reasons that there's this distinction between Hunter Biden and Matt Gaetz is because let's just call it out. There was a mistake that was made by Merrick Garland, who bent over backwards to appoint special counsels, usually from a different party, in order to act like appropriately that the agency, the department, was independent, it wasn't weaponized. And so rather than keeping it in-house, there's no reason that they couldn't have kept that investigation and conclusion about whether to prosecute or not at Main Justice. Just because it was the president's son, I don't think automatically under special counsel's rules he had to do that. But, Merrick Garland bent over backwards to create special counsels, and make them either Republicans or not friendly or whatever. And there's an old line about to a hammer, everything is a nail. And to a special counsel, everything is something that has to be prosecuted to justify their very existence. And so Weiss, the special counsel, or special prosecutor for Hunter Biden, had in his mind to conclude that there was a crime committed, a crime that is almost never prosecuted. 9-day ownership of a gun where he thought better of it and threw it in a dumpster. And he self-reported it in his own memoir. That's who you go after. If Hunter's last name was Horowitz, let's be frank, he would not have been prosecuted. It's because MAGA was all over Weiss to do something, and he felt he had to do something. And they should have cut that deal in Delaware that would have resolved both the tax case and the gun case in one neat package. And it probably would have led Hunter Biden to have served some jail time, which he was willing to do and offered to do at that moment. But that moment passed, and then it got really politicized, as you would expect it would, because of what the Oversight Committee run by MAGA and the Judiciary Committee run by MAGA was doing on a daily basis to make themselves relevant and to get attention to go after poor civilian Hunter Biden. And yet, you're right. Maybe because the Department of Justice didn't want to be accused of being weaponized. So they dropped Matt Gaetz. You and I all both agree on so many things, but one of the things we agree on is that they should never have dropped the investigation on Matt Gaetz. And they should have, but they were like, well, we don't want to be weaponized. He's in office and okay. So they don't do it. That was another big mistake. There's going to be a lot of criticism in the memoirs and the books that'll be written about Merrick Garland's tenure. I think that's another one to chalk up to that. In terms of the crimes that were committed, these are crimes that were committed as alleged and now substantially backed in the ethics report. It's up to a strong-willed prosecutor, probably one of the Democratic ones in Miami, to try to find some link or nexus. I'll give you an example. Here we go. We're just brainstorming here. If they really went out of the country and they took any of those cheap cruises out of Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, or Miami for some of this, those are controlled by Democratic state attorneys, and they could be investigating whether that trafficking happened out of a port in one of those three places. I would look into that as well. As to the Fed side, you're right. They're not going to do a darn thing about it, but the hypocrisy stinks and just shows you where the lack of Republican values are on these particular issues. I have a question for you before we leave Matt Gaetz. He's threatened to come back. He didn't come back in the 118th. He can't come back in the 119th. They're already going to fill that position. Where do you think he ends up? And then I want to ask you, what do you think DeSantis does with the open Senate seat that will come up with? Because now that what's her face? Laura Bush. Lara Trump has decided, I don't even know what her big announcement was, but she's decided she doesn't want to have that Senate seat. Do you think DeSantis picks himself for the Senate seat? What do you think happens there? It's very interesting to me.
No, I mean, I think DeSantis is going to pick a DeSantis loyalist who's not in the MAGA orbit. There's still that conflict between him and Trump that exists. Trump did a de sanctimonious thing the other day as well. I think that DeSantis was waiting to see if Trump was potentially going to make him Secretary of Defense and get rid of Hegseth. Trump went all in on Hegseth, and then DeSantis didn't want to get played by Trump. So he then responded, no, Lara, to which Trump then responded, oh, that's de sanctimonious. Lara acted like she was bowing out. And if you think about the people in Trump's world who may have got that position, like a Byron Donalds or someone else, I just think that DeSantis is not going to go to someone who's that loyal to Trump. I think he may pick someone who's not even necessarily on our radar, who's very loyal to DeSantis.
Why not himself? Why not? He's termed out. Why not put himself in the position?
I think that will look very self-serving. He'll get mocked for it. I think he's positioning himself to run in 2028 against J.D. Vance. I think that he takes, I think he takes time off, after, or, he views it as he phases out and then he runs against, he runs in 2028. I think if he appoints himself, he'll get mocked for that in the MAGA base. I think it's a bad political move.
Mhm.
It's a bad look. I mean, not that I'm trying to give DeSantis advice,
pointers,
but I'm trying to think about it to answer your question. That he's not going to appoint himself. I mean, he'd rather be governor. And why go through why be a senator and then be under kind of Donald Trump's MAGA Senate orbit when you have Florida? It just, if for an ambitious, power hungry guy, it doesn't seem like a move to get less power than you're going to get right now.
Yeah, I mean, the governors do in Florida move into the Senate. Rick Scott's an example of that. But you're right. I think it's a lot of political grief. The juice is not worth the squeeze to put himself in, although it's happened before. Governors have put themselves into that short time track. We give him 2 years in the Senate, and then he'd have to run again. But you're right. If his ultimate ambition is to run against a weak Republican field, and not to pat ourselves on the back, but let our bench on the Democrat side, I will take it any day and twice on Sunday for the not just for midterms, but for the presidential election that is coming up after this one. Then the Republican side. I mean, this the recycling of Nikki Haley and DeSantis, all previously rejected, and Ramaswamy and whoever else we're not thinking of, a couple of governors. I would take our bench in a heartbeat, and because there's going to be we're seeing chaos now in a MAGA civil war. Wait till Daddy's not around anymore to, with his thumb and his oppressive tactics to hold that party together. It just flies away as far as I'm concerned.
Here's the thing. Democrats need to get out of their own head. We talked about Merrick Garland. To your point, criticism is probably putting it lightly. What's going to happen after that tenure about how he did everything. But he was so worried about looking fair that he ended up being unfair to his own team and to his own people. And he basically weaponized it against his own people and gave all of the benefits and favors to the other side. Democrats need to be Democrats again. It's clear right now in this moment that there is a strong rejection of oligarchs and billionaires and the 1% that's screwing everybody else. People are getting wise and savvy to the fact that the reason that we're angry and right now is actually not because of the transgender volleyball player from San Jose State University, or because there's a congresswoman from Delaware who's using the female bathroom in Congress, or that an immigrant in Ohio is not actually eating your cats and dogs, but that the billionaires are literally eating your lunch. That they've created a structure that's rigged the game against the average Jane and Joe and American to screw them. That private equity has slurped up all of the supply of housing, which has made it completely unaffordable so they can commoditize it and sell it. And when they screw up, they get bailed out by the government, by their rich Republican friends in the government. People are getting wise and they're pissed to this. And Democrats need to act like Democrats and not Republican light. Democrats need to lean into these issues and not get so psyched out. They need to stand up and be loud and proud and say, no, we're actually here for the people. And they shouldn't wait until the midterms or in the election to start going to the factories and speaking to the firefighters. I always say ABC, always be campaigning. And you've got to have a constant on switch, because otherwise you look phony and inauthentic when you go back to these communities and constituencies 90 days before an election and ask for their vote. You have to go and you have to start explaining to them right now, look who Donald Trump's appointing to this position, that position, that position, that position, this position. That's all Project 2025. They're going to take away your benefits. You're a union worker. Why are you voting against your own union? What are you doing? You're voting against yourself and your family and higher wages and overtime and your Social Security and Medicare, and explain it to them now. Don't wait until the election. Anyway, I don't even know why I went on that tangent, but Democrats be Democrats, okay? And focus on the issues and deliver for the people and message those issues and do those issues. That's what I want to see. Anyway, regardless, let me be very clear about this.
DBD, Democrats be Democrats.
Democrats be Democrats, and ABC, always be campaigning.
Welcome back. Legal AF, full-length podcast, about an hour long, every Wednesday and Saturday on the MeidasTouch Network at 8 p.m. Wednesdays, I do it with Karen Friedman at Niflo. Saturdays, right there with Ben Meiselas. And then we do hot takes like this about every hour right here on the MeidasTouch Network. If you know all about Legal AF, we thank you. This is a people-powered, Midas Mighty Legal AF-powered network. We don't have outside investors. There's ways to support us. I got a new show, for instance, called Popok Live, Tuesday nights. I take questions. I give answers and commentary and analysis that you've come to expect from me. Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. on the MeidasTouch YouTube channel. And then a new channel on YouTube called Legal AF MTN for MeidasTouch Network. We do it in collaboration. I'm the chief curator. Amazing content exclusively on the Legal AF YouTube channel. Take a moment and hit the free subscribe button there as well. If you know about Legal AF, thank you for being part of our audience. If you would like to help us, the ways to help us continue to grow is take that clip, send it off to people in your life, and ask them to join our journey as part of their own. Join our audience, a personal request from Popok to them. And so I appreciate you being here. So until my next Legal AF, no matter where it is, I'm Michael Popok, and I'm reporting. In collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.